So the big change to global PvP with a 40-second swap on characters has really sort of buffed and nerfed some characters. I'm getting asked a lot about it, so we're going to go through every character and the buffs and nerfs. If you didn't know, basically over on the Taiwanese version, I think it was about a 3-second cooldown on the swap timer. On global, they changed it to 40, which in my opinion is a horrible decision. It's like a basic attack spam fest at the moment. It's just not that enjoyable. But let's go through the winners and losers. Also, quick one, there have been some other things that have changed in characters' mechanics, which I'll go through as well, but I haven't tested every character, so some of the others might have some little changes as well. But basically, the 40-second change thing, in general, it's going to help slow attackers and those units with lower cooldowns. They're the main ones that are going to benefit from it. So we'll just go through in order. Uraraka, it's a minor buff because you can sort of get yourself locked in against an enemy because they can't swap out. So she can she's basically floating is safer for Uraraka now because you can choose your enemy that you float against, and they can't just freely swap into something that counters as much because of that cooldown. Especially if they swap into a Deku, then you just go up. And you swap to your Uraraka, you can go up and you can float, you can do all that sort of stuff. But Uraraka, if she's stuck in against something that can counter her, it's still not the end of the world because she's got quick basic attacks and she's pretty solid all around. So Uraraka, I'd say it's a bit of a buff, not like the biggest thing ever, but not too bad. Todoroki, it's actually a buff because like I said, the biggest ones that gain advantage from this is slow attackers and attackers with range. And Todoroki basically fits into that mold. I'll talk a bit more when we get into Deku about why it sort of buffs these characters. But Todoroki also, with his skill set, being able to swap elements, he's always got abilities available as well. So he doesn't have to rely on basic attacks as much. And he has a lot of abilities with low cooldowns with the range, which is incredibly useful in this meta. I just really suck at Todoroki and I can't make him work. Next up, Ida. Ida's actually a buff, and he's got another little buff. At least I think it's a buff. I don't remember it on the Taiwanese version. But his Recipro Burst, which is his E ability, when he's charging it, he's actually immune to knockbacks, so he can't get flinched while he's charging it, which is a buff. But once again, he's one of those ones that he can stay in. Enemies swapping was really a big issue for Ida, but now that they stay in, he can really ramp up his speed and actually deal some massive damage. I've actually been having a lot of fun with Ida lately, but yeah, it's going to be a buff for Ida. Moving into Deku. Now, Deku is the biggest loser of this change. Basically, the thing about Deku that made him amazing, also, Deku got another nerf, which was his Finger Smash used to flinch with the basic tap. Now it has to be fully charged to be able to flinch. But Deku is the biggest nerf in this because the best way to engage with a Deku previously, especially against slower attackers like Tokoyami and stuff like that, because for instance, Tokoyami, his basic attack is a really slow animation. Same with his W and his E as well. What you could do with a Deku was, once you see them starting to do an ability, you swap from whatever character you're on into a Deku, and then you could engage. And the thing about swapping is it gives you a second of immunity, so they could be using whatever attack they want, and you could just go straight through it and engage with Deku without having to worry about getting hit. And that was the strongest point of Deku, was to swap engage, do your combos, then swap out. And then you could swap engage, do your combos, and then swap out. That was a really strong way of playing Deku. Now, unfortunately, you can't do that. Well, you can do it once every 40 seconds, but then you're sort of stuck in with Deku, who has a harder time engaging against enemies without the swap, just because, especially now, it's a spam fest and you just walk in and everyone's just spamming basic attacks, hoping to out-time the other one, which is just, it's so bad. But Deku definitely got the biggest nerf. He got a Finger Smash nerf, and then he also did get a nerf, basically just because swapping isn't available to him to use the way he normally does. Next up, Froppy. Froppy sort of, she's indifferent. If you were using the cheese strategy of swapping to her, going camouflage, and then swapping out and using, it was a cheese that I used when I played Froppy as well. That got nerfed, but Froppy's actually got really good staying power, and she's a really good one to leave in, so you can stack the poisons, get the stuns, and all that sort of stuff. So Froppy's sort of she's not too phased by it. She's happy. She's not happy. She's not sad. She's just cool with it. Ojiro, honestly, I'm not too. I only ever played against one Ojiro in my whole time on Taiwanese, so he's just gonna sit there. I'm still undecided on him. I haven't played him too much, but yeah, he's just going to sit there until I decide to play him. He's just such a boring looking dude that I can't be bothered playing him, to be honest. Mineta, another one, it hasn't really given him a massive buff or a massive nerf. You know, enemies having to stay in, getting slowed by his balls, but otherwise they'd swap in and get slowed by his balls. It's all the same for Mineta. No massive change there. Kirishima is another big winner in this one. This is a huge win for Kirishima, just because, one, he was fantastic at swapping, but two, he's fantastic at staying in, because he's got that mind games threat of, is he going to counter? Is he not going to counter? He's got good ability penetration with his headbutt ability. Like if someone's using one ability and he's using the headbutt normally wins the battle of who's going to get the engage. His first two punches on his basic attack are pretty quick, so he can get in with that. He's obviously got his ground smash, which is really handy for a gap closer. And like I said, he was really good at swapping and also really good at staying in. A thing that really sort of hurt him was enemies swapping in on him, and now he's just, it's really just a prime time for Kirishima at the moment in the meta, so he's absolutely dominating and loved the 40-second change. Kaminari, Kaminari's a tough one. He likes it if he gets stuck in against an enemy who's has a hard time against him. Kirishima trying to close in on him has a hard time. But if he gets stuck in against an enemy who has a good time against him, then he's kind of boned. So he's sort of 50-50 on this one as well. Moving on from that, Aizawa, we're not going to cover Aizawa until he actually drops into the meta. Momo I definitely think is a buff for, because she loves the ability to just ramp up her turrets, and enemies swapping would always interrupt her flow and make her have to swap out and reset. But the fact that enemies are going to stay in more often allows her to engage, ramp up those turrets, and then really just destroy enemies. Moving on from that, we'll go to Bakugo first, because he is another big nerf. So Bakugo was one who played as a pivot character. So he was one where you'd swap to him, you do his two little combo things, try and do your combos, and then you'd get straight out. Like, he was really good at swapping in, even against something like a Kirishima, because if you swap into Bakugo, swap in with Bakugo to a Kirishima, and use his E ability, he goes up in the air. So even if he hits Kirishima trying to counter, he's in the air by the time the counter hits, and he doesn't actually get hit by it. So he was the perfect pivot for players that were good at him, where you pivot in, you do some abilities, literally you do his E, and then do his Qs to try and blow them up, and then you do his W to try and lunge, and then you do your Qs, and then you just get straight out of him. That was the way he's played. He's got really long cooldowns. He's really bad with the 40-second change. And then the final unit we are looking at is going to be Tokoyami, and he is probably the biggest buff from this whole situation. Tokoyami, I used to always say, you play him as a pivot, you wait till enemies are sort of closing in on you, you swap to him, you use his Q, it starts your engage, you do a full combo, then you can either re-engage or you can swap out. But the thing about this is, like I said at the start, slow attackers or attackers with range get the biggest advantage out of this. And Tokoyami's the one, because it's harder to do a swap engage on him, which was the most common way to deal with a Tokoyami. Now he's got range, and so he can still pivot in with your one pivot every 40 seconds, engage, and then he's just got the staying power because the enemies don't have as many opportunities to swap in and engage on him, and it just makes this guy an absolute monster in the current meta. He definitely he outclasses everything at the moment. Obviously, Aizawa is going to change things, but at the moment, I definitely think Tokoyami is at the very top along with Kirishima due to this change, because they both love it, because they were both great at swapping in, but they were both great at staying when the enemies couldn't swap. And that's where these two absolutely shine. So the two biggest winners for me are definitely Tokoyami and Kirishima, and the two biggest losers are Deku and Bakugo. But anyway, that is one man's opinion on the current meta. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.